What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our college football week 6 preview and picks. As always, I have Ty joining me here to break down this week's best games. But before we get into it, subscribe to our channel where we're doing a giveaway at 500 subscribers. But first, we'll talk about last weekend. It was a very good week for both of us. Ty going 11-1, myself 10-2. And I'll just leave it open to here for you. What was probably the best game that you saw and watched, and kind of what was the biggest letdown last week?
I would probably say the Georgia game raised my eyebrows the most. Not, I mean, obviously they came out with the win again, really struggled their way to a win. But I just think they look really beatable this year. And I think this is the most wide open year of college football we've seen in a while. It almost reminds me of some college basketball seasons we've seen. Because I think there's probably eight-ish teams, maybe even more, that could actually win the national championship. And the Georgia game really showed that, obviously, with them barely getting by Auburn.
Yeah, I got to go with the LSU Ole Miss game. Obviously, some fireworks throughout the whole game. Jackson Dart, you saw if you saw his press conference, you could have never would have guessed that that was a 55-49 game. He just was so calm, cool and collected just throughout the whole game. And maybe they're a team to watch out for in the SEC because there's always one every single year that makes that surprise run and plays pretty well. But we'll jump into this week's picks, and Ohio State comes out of a bye, should be well rested and perform well. But this Maryland team, you talk about it all the time. September Maryland is a great team, but as the months continue, they start to fall apart. And I think that's where the first loss is going to come from with Ohio State. But I think Maryland does cover there. Ohio State hasn't really put teams away, especially, this year. So I got to go with the Buckeyes, though, straight up.
Yeah, like you said, September's over. So is Maryland taking a step forward this year? We'll kind of start to find out. I think this will be the best test for Ohio State's secondary, because obviously Tagovailoa from Maryland, pretty top tier quarterback in the country, but obviously I don't think Maryland's going to quite get it done. I think Ohio State's offense is going to have a big day.
Then on ESPN, a game where you thought these teams' records would probably be switched. LSU sitting here at 3-2 and could possibly fall out of the rankings here. And I think that's what's going to happen with Brady Cook, the quarterback for Missouri. He's putting on some good showing so far this year. And they're going to get to 6-0 and turn some heads in the SEC as they look to have a strong second half of the season.
Yeah, I just it's hard to see LSU losing this third game here. I think if they lose this week, it's going to be panic mode. Just basically a fire drill at LSU, because this was supposed to be the year that they turned the corner and potentially won the SEC. Obviously, that's pretty much already out of the question. Playoff hopes are already gone, but this is basically a must-win to keep the trajectory going in the right direction. I think if Missouri wins, they'll probably end up playing Georgia for the East Division, but I don't see it happening. I think LSU squeaks one out here on the road.
And then the biggest game of them all this week, Oklahoma, Texas, Red River shootout. And I'm going with the Sooners here. And they're getting 5 points here. And I saw a stat earlier that Oklahoma has covered every single game that they've played in this year, whether they're favored or not. Man, getting the 5 points, I think this game is going to be decided by a field goal either way. And I'm going with the Sooners here. I think Texas is due for a letdown. I can't say they're officially back until they win these big games. So just because of history, I got to go with Dylan Gabriel and the Sooners.
Yeah, I think the winner of this game goes to the college football playoff, to be honest. I know Oklahoma, a lot of people would be surprised to hear that about them. But if you look at their schedule, I don't really see another loss after this game for them. Now they would probably have to play again in the Big 12 championship, but I think Texas is going to pull this one off. I think Oklahoma is definitely much improved, but I just can't look past the 49 to nothing game last year. I know it's a different season, but I just can't move past that. I think Texas has the upper hand in this rivalry right now, and I think that's going to continue this year.
Then on Peacock, you got a battle in the Big Ten, a game that's definitely going to be flying under the radar just because of all those good games you've seen already at 12. Rutgers and Wisconsin, and two programs looking to change the trajectory, not only their season, but the next few seasons as well. And I think Wisconsin's going to get on that path to success here and get a big road win at home.
Yeah, I think Wisconsin gets this one as well. I do think Rutgers covers here. I think Shiano's got something brewing there at Rutgers, maybe a bowl game this season. But I think Wisconsin continues to stay on the right path here and they get a win at home.
Then moving to the 3 o'clock slate, Washington State, UCLA should be a tough battle for the Cougars, but I think they're going to go in there and get a win. And time in and time out, these last few years, they've just proved that they're a top 25 team in the country when it's all said and done. And nonetheless, if they get a win this week, I think you might be looking at a top 10 team this time next week.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised by the line here. I've been really impressed with Washington State. They seem like a really tough team. They got that big win over Oregon State earlier, and I'm just not completely sold on UCLA. Yes, it's a home game, but we've seen what their home games look like. It'll be probably half full. It's a noon game, so not an intimidating environment. So don't let that throw you off. I think Washington State goes in there and gets what I guess is an upset.
Then at 3:30, Syracuse, North Carolina. And this one is more on Syracuse about how they're going to respond after last week's beatdown at home against Clemson. If they come out, lay an egg, then I think North Carolina cruises to a big win. But if they come out with a strong first half, then I think North Carolina might be in a dogfight heading into the fourth quarter. I still think they get it done, but I don't know if I could take that spread if I'm trying to bet on this North Carolina game.
Yeah, it's a tough spread to bet on. I think North Carolina is going to give up some points. I'm still not sold at all on their defense. But Syracuse, I just don't see them doing a whole lot this year. Had a very underwhelming performance against Clemson last week. So I think North Carolina is going to get this done at home. I think they'll just outscore Syracuse.
And then the biggest game at 3:30, Alabama, Texas A&M. And yeah, you can look at that, right? I am going with the Aggies at home. Jimbo knows how to play against Saban. And I think this is one of the weakest teams Saban's had in the last 5 years. And going into the 12th man where, well, A&M needs this win to keep the hopes alive for this year. I think they're going to get it done. And normally this spread would be at least a touchdown, no matter how good Alabama is. But times are changing here in the SEC, and at the bigger conference next year, there's going to be a lot up in the air. And I think this is Saban's last shot at a legitimate title every year. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Aggies and Jimbo put a rest to that.
Yeah, this just feels like a game that's a huge boost for whoever wins, and it's a really, really deflating loss for whoever loses. Obviously, Jimbo and Texas A&M have been written off since 3 games into last season. Alabama's been written off since their Texas game this year. But I do think whoever wins, it's going to be a huge boost to their season. I don't think Texas A&M's quite there yet to be able to get this win. Alabama's just proved it so many times that like when their back is against the wall, they come up with a big win. I think they'll do it again in a close game on the road.
And then at 4, you have UCF, Kansas, Big 12 game here that's, definitely going to catch some eyes here after, Kansas played well last week against Texas, but didn't have Daniels. But Bean is a very capable starter. And I think that's why I'm going with Kansas. If Daniels doesn't play, I just don't think UCF is ready for the Big 12 stage yet. They've showed that they can hang with them, but consistently play and hang with them, I just can't believe it yet.
Yeah, I'm making this pick solely based on Daniels and his health. I don't know if he's playing, but if he is, he's not going to be 100%. And Kansas, while their offense is very fun to watch with Daniels, their defense is still not very good this year, and I think UCF is going to put up a lot of points and pull the upset on.
Then at 7, Kentucky, Georgia. As much as I want to take Kentucky here, I just can't bet against the number one team in the country at home. 14 and a half. I'll definitely take that Kentucky spread. Georgia hasn't proven to me that they can blow teams out of the water, whether it is at home or away. These last 2 SEC games they've played against South Carolina and Auburn, very concerning for me, and they're due for a slip up here. And I'm not saying they're going to get upset, but I'm not honestly going to be shocked if it does happen just because of what we've seen so far in SEC play. But, I'm taking the safe pick here and going with Georgia.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything. I don't think Georgia is anywhere near the juggernaut that they've been the last 2 years. Last year, they looked unbeatable basically the whole season outside of one game. This year, they've looked unbeatable for maybe a half. And I think that's going to show again this week. I think they'll be in another dogfight for about 3 quarters and then pull away at the end. But unfortunately, if Georgia gets through this game, they really only have one kind of tough game remaining, and that's at Tennessee. And I don't see them losing that. So this might be their toughest game left. and I still think they're going to win it.
And at 7:30, a game where I don't think coming into the season you had this one circled on the calendar. Maybe Louisville fans did, but I know Notre Dame was definitely overlooking this one because 5-0 Louisville, first year head coach coming over from Purdue and really turning this program around. I think Sam Hartman and company, they're doing everything they can to keep those playoff hopes alive. They go in there and get a win in Kentucky, but man, this Cardinals team is definitely a team to watch out for. I think moving forward after this week as well, as they could turn some heads and pull off some upsets in the ACC in the process.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you see this hat, but I got to give respect where it's due. Notre Dame has a gauntlet this year, and that's not even counting these Duke and Louisville road games that no one thought were going to be tough. And now they've been two really tough road night games in a row. And I think they get another win on the road here. I think Louisville's looked really good, but they haven't faced any defense anywhere near what Notre Dame has. So I think that's the difference. I think Notre Dame forces a couple turnovers and gets the win.
Then our boys, the Wolverines, go on the road to face Minnesota. And, honestly, as a Michigan fan, I'm kind of overlooking this one just because, we've dominated Minnesota for I don't know how long, at least 20 years. It just feels like it's just not a big game, even though we're playing for the jug. The offense is clicking. McCarthy's looking good. And not to mention, Donovan Edwards hasn't even had a good game this year. So I think this is a game where they're really going to try to focus on getting both of those guys involved and having big days. And I think Michigan runs away with this one in the second half.
Yeah, it's hard to see a way Michigan doesn't cover here. Obviously, Michigan just dominated Nebraska last week. Looked like varsity and JV. And Minnesota was in an absolute rock fight with Nebraska, won on a game-winning long field goal. So, I mean, yeah, it's at Minnesota. Yes, it's a night game, rivalry game, I guess. But I just don't see Michigan having any trouble here on either side of the ball.
Then the last game of the week, yeah, Mountain West battle already. 5-0 Fresno, 4-1 Wyoming, and Wyoming suffering a tough overtime loss to Texas Tech week 1. Otherwise, they both would be 5-0 here in a big matchup. And I'm going with the Bulldogs on the road. For the last, I think, 3 years we've been doing this channel and picking games. Fresno State somehow finds their way on all these big games and having a great record. And they know how to win these games. And I think they go on the road and cover as well.
I just got a weird feeling about this game. You know, those West Coast night games, something weird always happens. I don't really know much about either of these teams, but I'm gonna go with Wyoming. They seem like they pull an upset here every once in a while, and I guess this will be the one this year.
But that's going to be it for our picks this week. Make sure you guys check back next week to see how we did for this week's picks and to see what we're picking next week for the biggest games. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.